tonight we're going to be sharing with you our birth story. I guess my birth story, but I feel like Joshua was so very much involved throughout the whole laboring process that, you know, it's our birth story. And obviously she was involved, not Felicity.
Yeah.
All right, so I was planning on having my baby at the hospital. That was the plan the whole time. I had an OB and everything. And a few months into my pregnancy, I was actually I was convinced by my niece Chelsea that I should have a doula. She had a doula throughout her pregnancy and had all good things to say about it. And so as a first-time mom, I honestly didn't have a whole lot of, I have a lot of siblings that have had tons of kids. And so I've heard their experiences and whatnot, but I don't know, when you're a first-time mom, you don't really know what you're getting yourself into. And that's why I considered, okay, why not? Let's have a doula. And so we got our amazing doula, Rachel, to essentially help me emotionally, physically, and give me the information that I needed to know so that I knew all my options going into this first time pregnancy, birth, and postpartum experience. Anyhow, so Joshua at first, he wasn't too thrilled about a doula because
I just didn't get it. I didn't understand because from what Michaela told me about having a doula was she's there to help me physically and mentally and like to support me mentally was the biggest thing. I'm like, well, what are you talking about? She's like, well, I'll just need someone else there with me when I'm delivering just to help me out, like just to help me get through it, to help me deliver. And when she said that, I was like, what? Am I not enough?
He was offended.
It's like, what are you talking about?
He's like, pathetic.
So it was a little weird to me at first, and I never even heard or knew about what a doula was, so it was new.
But we are super grateful that we went through with it. And as she started coming over, we had our appointments leading up to labor and delivery. She just realized, wow, she's not just here for you, she's here for me as well as a husband. And that is the point of it. She's there to support all of us mentally, emotionally, and physically. And that's the thing. She helped Joshua throughout the process 100%, especially physically, to do counter pressure points. Anyhow, so with the pandemic, it was super weird. Like, Joshua couldn't come to appointments with me. Just a lot of like unfortunate things happened because of this weird time that we're living in. And one thing here in Utah, they changed the restriction at the hospital that I was going to be birthing Felicity at to one person, and you could only have one person. So obviously it was going to be my husband. But 2 months before my due date, they changed it back to 2 people, 2 visitors. And so I was like, okay, great, cool. And my doula and I had discussed birthing centers and other options just in case, you know, the restrictions changed back to 1, but I was banking on having her at the hospital. I didn't think it would change. But 2 days after my due date, I found out that the restrictions had changed and went back to 1 visitor. So of course that's going to be my husband. And I honestly was so frustrated and so, I don't know. I just had prepared so much to mentally prepare to have a natural birth. And that is a huge reason and part that I needed my doula, is because mentally I was determined to have this baby naturally. But if I didn't have my support people there to do it, I literally felt like it was just impossible. And I just felt I just didn't feel good. I didn't feel right about going to the hospital at all. One of my biggest fears was getting a C-section, and I understand C-sections they're not a bad thing at all. They're totally not. But I just had this fear that it would happen if I was at the hospital. Anyways, so there's all these things going through my mind, and I was very frustrated and sad and all the things because I could not have my doula there. And so I decided, you know what? This is my delivery. This is my birth experience. Like, I want support. The fact that I can't even have my mom there or whoever I want there is just crazy to me. And so the birthing center came to my mind, and I knew that they didn't have those types of restrictions. And so I, of course, reached out to my doula after learning about the changes. And I told her, I'm like, look, I need help with finding a birth center. And she gave me some amazing recommendations. And there's this one midwife that she referred me to in Orem, super close to where we live, and the birthing center there. I met her that same day I made that decision to change, and literally fell in love with her and just felt so calm and right about the decision to switch over to a birthing center. Thankfully, I got Joshua's support and he was on board.
I was very nervous though. I mean, she's already passed her due date. I had always thought, okay, like she's gonna have the baby at the hospital, but like she explained with the whole COVID restrictions and all the policies they have in place, it made it a little bit more difficult mentally to prepare for that, knowing that it may not end in the way that she wanted to deliver a baby. And then when she says, oh, I want to go to a birth center, last second, it's like, oh, shoot, like, well, good thing it's close to the hospital in case anything happens. Because that was my biggest worry, is like, one, I don't want anything to happen to my wife. Two, I don't want anything to happen to the baby. So.
Right, and that makes
But I was
sense.
supportive of it because I knew all along that she wanted a natural birth. And at a birth center, she's going to get that, unless there's complications and we have to go to the hospital. But that would be the place for her to be able to have the birth she wants.
Right, exactly. And so I felt like with the restrictions at the hospital that I wasn't given all my options. I felt stuck because I didn't have the support people that I knew I needed throughout this process. You know, labor and delivery is no joke. It is very hard. And regardless of how you go about it, epidural or not, and I was not against any of those interventions or the medication at all. I really wasn't, but I wanted mentally to go natural. Anyhow, so we went ahead with it, feeling very confident, and I was a week overdue, and then I was 11 days overdue, and it was about day 10 when I started early labor contractions, and they were like every 10 minutes. And so for a solid day, I had contractions that were every 10 minutes. And then into the next morning, on day 11, past my due date, I was having contractions about like at 1 o'clock in the morning, 2 o'clock or so, contractions every 3 to 5 minutes, very consistently. And so I'm like, oh my gosh, it's finally here. Like, oh my gosh, because my body was preparing very slowly, and I just happened to have early labor a lot before the actual active labor. Anyhow, so on day 11, early that morning, we headed to the birth center. I was checked and I was at 5 centimeters, and so my midwife allowed me to stay. And so I labored there, and after 4 hours, she checked me again, and I was only at 5.5. And my blood pressure was high, and my midwife is amazing. No midwife is ever gonna cross boundaries as to, you know, what they can and cannot do with their practice and with their expertise. And so she told me, like, if this blood pressure, it wasn't skyrocket high, but it was
close. It was borderline.
It was borderline that she wasn't going to risk the biscuit. So she's like, you have 2 options. It's either you're going to have to go to the hospital to have this baby, or 2, you're going to go home. We're going to slow down your contractions. You're going to take Tylenol and ibuprofen and some magnesium to slow them down so you can get some rest, because your body needs rest. You need time to get sleep. And so I was like, of course I want to do the latter. I do not want to go to the hospital. I'm so stubborn. I was so stubborn. I'm like, okay, blood pressure, you need to come down. And so we went home. And that's always unfortunate, you know, you hate having to be told to go home because you're getting so close. And so we went home, and for that whole rest of the morning that we got there at 7:30, we got home at 7:30 a.m. and I rested until about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, as much as I could.
And this is where I was really glad we had a doula.
Oh yeah,
because I just worked a graveyard, or half of a graveyard, before we went to the birth center that morning, where she was talking about where she dilated to 5 and hadn't really progressed. So I was exhausted. So I didn't sleep. I came home from work, was with her for a little bit. We went to the birth center, came back, and then I was up with her the rest of the day until when she's talking about early afternoon when her doula came over to continue to help with counter pressures because she was still having contractions.
Right. And so throughout those contractions, so that I could get more rest, I would just slightly signal to them so I could keep sleeping. I'm having a contraction, and they would do those counter pressure points on me so I could keep at least getting rest through those. It was so wild. But they were an amazing support to me, and I could not have done it.
Yeah. Well, I couldn't have done it like without having her doula there as well. I was exhausted having her there, and if not, I don't know how I would have done it. Just constantly
Right.
having to apply pressure, whether it was on her hips or knees, whatever it was, not having the sleep, mentally supporting her, like letting her know like this, you're gonna be all right. This is gonna work out. Because obviously it was hard on her. It was hard on her body. She was exhausted too. So having her doula there helped a ton.
Yeah, and so thankfully we were able to get them slowed down so I could get that somewhat of rest. And all throughout the process, we were checking my blood pressure because my midwife wanted to make sure that it was low before we came back, because she would just send us to the hospital regardless. And so thankfully it went down. 3 out of the 4 times that we took it, we were good to go. And my doula had brought over castor oil and made me a chocolate shake that actually tasted pretty great. And I drank castor oil once I started feeling like, energized and ready to go. I drank it, and it ramped up my contractions back to where they were prior, and then some.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, they were like every 5 minutes that morning. They were like every 3 minutes.
3 to 5 minutes within there.
Like a solid 3 to, they were constant.
And this went on for a few hours from early afternoon until about 7 o'clock.
Yeah, it was about 7 o'clock. We then headed back to the birth center because I felt very we need to get there. I got checked by my midwife as soon as we got there, and I was at a 7.5, which was great. I'm in active labor at that point, and the first thing I wanted to do was hop into the bath. And so that is what I did. The tub was what I was looking forward to most. And I tell you what, it was a glorious experience. My doula was super helpful, and especially Joshua, he hopped into the tub.
Wasn't planning on it.
He hopped into the tub and was doing the counter pressure points, helping my doula do that as well. And it was fabulous. So after a while of being in the tub, we transitioned to the bed. I hated the bed. It was terrible. Could not do that. And then also to the squat stool. The squat stool was my favorite thing of all time. Well, that and the tub were my favorites. And so I continued to labor actively on the squat stool. I was in my Zen yoga mode, and I literally loved, I know the early labor was pretty extensive, but I thoroughly enjoyed it. All of that. It was annoying that it was every 10 minutes or so that I was having contractions, but I enjoyed every bit of my early labor and active labor, just because I was in such a mindset of calmness and connectedness with my body and with my baby. Was it hard? Yeah, but I was able to mentally just ride the wave essentially. And I just thought about being in Florida on the beach, and one of my favorite things doing there was being in the water in the waves. And so I literally was envisioning that in my Zen mentality that I was in, and it was amazing. I can't believe I'm telling you this, but I legit labored butt naked the whole time. It's fine. Yeah, so that's kind of interesting. Didn't have a gown on or anything, but it's fine. Just in my own little
Pretty
world.
easy going.
I was free flowing.
Other than the whole labor thing, that wasn't easy going, but everything else was.
And that's the thing, I'm so grateful for him and my doula and my midwife and her assistants. They supported me and rooted me on mentally, physically, emotionally. They were there for me. My husband and doula, they labored with me throughout this whole process, and I'm so grateful for it. And there was just no judgment. So I'm very grateful. Anyhow, so the birth stool and the tub were my favorite things. So it was at 7:30 we got there, and it was about
Midnight.
11 o'clock ish when I was at 9.5, and they broke my water.
Yeah.
The water went everywhere. That was a really weird feeling, and I then, at 12 o'clock, was at 10 centimeters ready to push. And so, like I said, I enjoyed everything with early and active labor. I just felt so like empowered, and it was amazing. Yes, it was hard, but I was just going with every contraction. And then pushing started, and let me tell ya, I was exhausted. My body was done for. My mind was done for at that point, and it was rough. She made her way ever so slowly through that birth canal.
Extremely slow.
Like an hour into it, I was just like, okay, oh my gosh. And at an hour and a half, I literally was screaming. And that was pretty intense. I was like yelling. I wouldn't say screaming because you need low tones to get the baby out.
You were yelling.
I was yelling. I was literally yelling.
She was exhausted.
I was so exhausted, spent.
We were all
I was
exhausted.
sweating. It was literal hell. I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. In an hour and a half of pushing, it's just rough. It was so hard, especially as she was starting to crown. That was rough. But one thing I do want to mention, yes, I yelled a lot, but during my namaste active labor, it was so so great. I didn't have to scream or anything or whatever the heck it is. But while doing it, this is how I was breathing. I have to show you this because I basically spit on everyone near me. It was like this.
What's your mom doing? What is she doing?
I literally, that was like my namaste. I'm gonna breathe this out. This is all good in the hood, breathing. So I went from that calm, collected Michaela in labor to like, no joke. That. Anyways, the pushing part was terribly hard, and that lasted until 3:27. So 3 hours I was pushing to get this cutie into this world.
It was exhausting, not just for her, but for all of us. And for me, I was literally sweating. I was exhausted. Like, counter pressure, wasn't in the best positions because she's on this really short birth stool.
It's like this far off the ground.
There wasn't really a good place to sit because on the ground it was uncomfortable. If you're sitting in a chair, the chair was a little too high for where you were pushing. Whether it was in front on her knees or back, whatever it was. And it was exhausting. And getting in and out of the tub with her, doing that with her. I mean, it wasn't as bad as it was for her delivering the baby, but like, we were tired. So I was glad her doula was there, midwife was there, and her assistants were there because just like, it was just me. Holy smokes, that would have been hard.
And so that just goes back to that support and how vital it is with a natural birth. And just any kind of birth, regardless if you're doing it naturally or not, like, that support is so vital. And I am so grateful because, like, the midwives, their assistants, my doula, they're reminding me what my body is meant to do. Like, your body's meant to stretch, your body is meant to birth a child, your body is meant to do these things. And those words of affirmation and that support literally got me through that, because that is literally what I was hanging on to. And I'm just so grateful for the support that I had through that. Like, my midwives, their assistants, her assistants, my doula, Joshua, all of them. I'm so grateful I had that. And I could not have done that without them. I really couldn't. And it was...
That's the best part. But...
Oh, the best part. So as the crown
3 hours, that's the 3 hours.
The ring of fire, pushing and screaming through it. Her head went through and everything just slithered out. It was like a little snake slithering out, and my midwife.
And I'm sitting behind Michaela, like pushing on her hips, helping her, and Michaela's pushing, and then all of a sudden she comes out, and the midwife's like, "Catch your baby!
Catch your baby!" And I'm just like. And Josh was like helping me because I'm so weak at that point.
Yeah, and then we caught her.
And she slithered up on me, and her eyes were just like
wide open,
like ready to see the world.
Not a peep out of her, just watching us.
And she just was so darling. And then she started crying like, it was so cute. And it was just, I remember just shaking and having all these chills come over me, and just like. Like, I wanted to cry, but I was just so over breathing because I had been breathing so like intensely and chasing every contraction I could the last hours of
Hours for days.
and
Days.
I just like couldn't like anyways, the most amazing experience ever, and it was just so surreal when it was done. So that morning, after I pooped out my placenta,
So
we were there for
she
just
was
another.
born at 3:27, and then we left at 7:30ish.
Yeah. So
and came home.
We were gone and out of there. I was doing good.
As long as she could get up and go to the bathroom and
Yeah.
come back without passing out.
And with
She was good to
help
go.
too, if he had to help me, we were good to go. And so we came home, we were able to sleep in our bed, and it was actually really nice. But yeah, overall, the birthing experience at the birth center was literally optimal, and it was amazing. I felt like I was in amazing hands, which I was. My midwife was fantastic, and my support group was amazing. And me personally, that's what I needed. And every birth story is so unique, and it's so personal, and it's not easy. Like, it is empowering however you birth a child, I believe. And I don't know, it just is amazing that she's here healthy, and we're one happy family, and we're so grateful for the experiences that we had and the support that we had through that experience. Yeah, for doulas and midwives.
Yep.
So thanks for listening to our birth story.